Welcome guys to another edition of BTS Live. That stands for Behind the Scenes Live. This is a special edition today, Tuesday. Normally we don't do a show today, but since I screwed up the show so badly yesterday with all my audio issues with Mark, and it turned out that wasn't Mark's fault, it was all on my end, and we'll get into that. And then due to Stephen Haywood's help, he is tremendous and tremendously generous with his time. And he really helped me troubleshoot this problem. And then that's the name of our show today, The Benefits of Proper Troubleshooting. And it's funny, I mean, one of the places we're streaming today is Blab. It's meant to be very, very easy, and it is. And that's what's great. And for many people producing video content, that's really the biggest stumbling block, is just getting started. And a lot of people kind of stumble with the complexity of everything, producing video, all the equipment you need, and Blab makes that very easy. But the other part of it is, with the ease comes, people think there may be an easy button, and it really isn't so. And I will kind of share my experience with that. I tried to use the easy button using HDMI embedded audio when I tried to bring Mark in through Skype. And I was getting all kinds of audio sampling issues. And you guys were here today. It sounded like Mark was a chipmunk, like it was very high pitched. And that had to do with the digital audio. And while granted, it simplifies my wiring, you could run into issues with software and that type of thing. And apparently I had some issues with audio sampling not matching up. So Stephen and I went through and we troubleshooted, and I'll kind of bring you through that process, and I'll kind of bring you through a simplified kind of mixer setup that I use, and kind of bring you through the whys of what we did, what we looked for, what the cause was, and how we corrected it. But before we get into that, I want to make everyone aware of our a couple things with our group. Little housekeeping here. First of all, we have a Facebook group. Many of you are part of that Facebook group. It's facebook.com/groups/BTS Live. I think we're up to like 130 members. It's a great group of people over there. I've met so many wonderful folks, and great conversation. So I encourage you, if you have not joined, certainly check that out. You can also check out during the week when we're live and when we're not live. We're streaming on btslive.com. That's our website. Right now it's just a landing page, but it will be eventually a full website, and my plan is to post each episode as a blog post with notes and all that kind of stuff, and also a live streaming page like you're seeing here. This is a still of it so that you can see the shows, and basically also I can stream. Oh, that's right. And we'll stream live 24/7. That's the plan. Normally I stream 24/7 past shows, sort of like a TV network. So you have that. And I also want to promote something going on later today over at the techbuzz.net. This is Stephen Haywood's site and network. This is my inspiration. Stephen is a tremendous person, not only a tremendous broadcaster, but a tremendous person. Very generous, and I have the honor to be on his show tonight, Broadcast Now, and we're going to talk a little bit about creating community, and also a little bit about my troubles yesterday and what I did to fix it. So you want to look for that as well later on today. So we talked a little bit about on the group today, and the reason I'm showing you this vinyl backdrop is I had a question today on the Facebook group before I get into the whole audio issue, and someone asked, I think it's Cassandra asked, she was trying to use Cam Twist and trying to do a green screen and trying to do it kind of on the cheap, and she was having trouble with the program and trying to find out a program that would be inexpensive that she could use a green screen. And I want to address that a little bit here today, and the reason why I show this picture of this backdrop is I recommend most folks do not attempt to do green screen, especially if it's something that you're doing professionally or for business, because it's very, very difficult. And normally with the cheaper software, you're not really going to get a clean key. It's going to kind of look hokey. You're really going to have to step up to. I use a TriCaster and lighting and all that stuff to do my green screen when I use it. There's other software that you can use, Wirecast, but I suggest this using something like this. Our friend Mark Goodman, who's a member of our BTS live group on Facebook, does this with his shows, and it's a very simple thing. So this might be something you might want to consider. Instead of worrying about the green screen, this is something you could use. You can get a printed piece of vinyl and hang it up in a frame and still get your branding in there in the background. And this works quite well. And that way you're not using extra computer resources, and you're getting a nice clean picture, because really what you should be concerned about is getting a clean, simple, clean picture, nice audio, and good content. And that way, it doesn't tax your computer. So this is something that you may want to consider for those of folks that want branding in their production, but really don't have the resources to do a formal green screen. So that's one suggestion. So let's get into what we are here to talk about, and that is all my troubles yesterday with my audio and Mark. And so it was funny because in the previous week it worked just great. And again, this is a cautionary tale of why, one, you shouldn't use the easy button, which I did using HDMI embedded audio, and number two, why software can kind of flake out on you, and if you have a hardware solution, you're probably better off using that. So I'm going to go back to my slides here and show you. This is the mixer I use. This is a Behringer mixer. It is very, very basic. It's basically a 4 input. It has 2 mics input and a 3 other, actually total of 5 mic inputs, and 3 of the inputs are line inputs. So it's a pretty basic setup. And so I'm going to take you through this here. So we're gonna concentrate on looking at this one channel strip here. So I have highlighted over here. This is a channel strip. Okay, so it entails the input section on top, and then the control section on the bottom. And I'm gonna roughly go through this and keep it very, very simple. Give you a kind of overview of the audio mixer setup that I use. Okay, so on the top you'll notice that this particular channel strip is a combination mic and also line input, and you can see where my highlighted squares are. Okay, so the mic input is up here, and that's a traditional XLR input. That's a balanced line input, so the professional mics will have that kind of 3-pin input. And then on the bottom here is a left-right 1/4 inch input for line level audio. So if you had like a I don't know, an audio player or possibly a computer, a sound card, you can input it there. So that's your input. And then if you go down below, this is your channel strip. This is your control section here. And I'm going to kind of briefly go through each one of these knobs and to kind of let you know if they're important, what you should be concentrating on. So when you first set up your mixer, if you have a mic input into this particular channel strip, first step you want to do is you want to look at this fader. This is called a fader, and this is a fine control for, basically this is designed to kind of take away volume. All right, and you'll notice that the fader is at 0, and that's parity, right? So you should set up, the first step you should do is set up your fader right at 0. This is slightly below 0, but you should set up right at 0. And then right here, this right at 0, the top part is your gain. This is the next step. So these are the knobs you're going to want to increase and increase the gain of your, say you're plugging a microphone in. Now on this particular channel strip, the left gain knob is for the mic and the right gain knob is for the line input. So depending on what you're putting into this channel strip, you're going to use that particular gain knob. So let's say we were putting in a microphone. So the left gain knob is what you're going to want to adjust. And so what you're looking for is you want to adjust that mic and add gain to the mic up until the point where just below where it peaks. And I will show you in a later slide, this particular mixer has a kind of rudimentary audio meter on it, and it's not a full meter, but it'll give you some idea of how to adjust your audio. So you want to do it right before it peaks, and you're going to want to use that gain knob. And again, the fader should be at 0. And then you can use the fader if you have fine adjustments. So say if you have a guest coming on and you're bringing them in through Skype or through Hangouts and their audio fluctuates a little bit, you can use the fader bar to kind of do little adjustments there. But if you have everything properly set up, you shouldn't have to move anything. The next step is that this is your pan knob. This is your left right. So if you have a stereo signal, you'll notice on the left it'll be the L and then the R. So you want to have that right at 12 o'clock. This right in here needs adjusting, this particular knob. So this should be right at 12 o'clock to get a nice centered, especially if you use 2-channel audio. These next 3 knobs are the EQ. And on this particular mixer, they're different on all types of mixers, but on this particular mixer, you have 3 knobs here. The top knob is the high frequencies, the middle knob is the mid frequencies, and the bottom knob is the low frequencies. My suggestion is don't touch these. You want to have all these at 12 o'clock, basically at 0. And you really don't want to add EQ at the mixer if you can help it on your voice. You want to have a flat response. You might hear other people use it. You might hear other people kind of crank the highs, maybe crank the lows, and kind of get that, what Mike Phillips calls the boom and sizzle effect. The only problem is it may sound kind of cool in the beginning, but it's very fatiguing. And you're much better off leaving everything at 12 o'clock at 0. So you shouldn't even bother with these at all. In fact, to really use equalization, it really takes a lot of knowledge and skill to really do it right. And the 3 knobs aren't going to cut it. And you're going to add more harm than good if you try to use these. So now we get to these last 2 knobs here, right? So this was the kind of the crux of my issue yesterday. So what I really need to do, instead of relying on the embedded audio and the HDMI cord, and the HDMI, if you have a flat panel TV, you all have HDMI. It's that little like flat cord that you plug into the back of your TV to get audio and video. And it's great in that application, but it's not particularly great in my application because I ran into audio sampling issues. So really what I should be doing, since I have the ability, is to take my audio analog and to do it the right way. And the right way is setting up a mix minus. Now, you may have heard mix minus in that term before, but I'll kind of go through that with you here. And you'll hear it mentioned by folks like myself or Steven and some of the more advanced broadcasters on here. And many of us will set up our mixers to do mix minus and handle our audio completely separate from any kind of digital video or any kind of, we handle audio and video separately. So all mix minus is the mix part is the full program mix of your program. So, if you have multiple hosts, it's all their audio. Maybe you might be playing a video, you might be playing other audio, whatever, all the audio for that particular program, it's the full mix. The minus part is what I send back. In my case, when I have Mark on my show and I have him coming in through Skype, if I send him back the full mix, he would not only hear the whole show, but he would also hear himself. And that would be very disconcerting because it would be on a slight delay. And he would be like, it would be very, very annoying. You wouldn't be able to talk because you'd be listening to yourself on a slight delay. So how do we, eliminate that? How do we account for that? Well, we do something called mix minus. So the minus part is basically I send Mark back the whole mix minus himself. And the way I can do that is I can use an auxiliary send. So basically an auxiliary send on a mixer is a separate sub mix of whatever you want to put in there. So in this case, what I do is I use that little knob on the bottom. In fact, I'll show you on my slides here. So on the bottom there, you see that little orange knob. That's an FX send. That's an effects send. And what I'm able to do there is literally assign all the channels. So I'm sending him back myself, and I'm sending him back any kind of videos I'm playing from my TriCaster. So I'm basically sending him, and then I don't send him back his own voice. So I'm able to assign all that into that one knob, and then there's an output on the mixer that I'm able to take a 1/4-inch plug and send it back to him through an audio interface and all that. So what he hears basically is the whole mix without hearing himself. And that's what I set up here. So I'll show you on the other side of the mixer here. So this other side of the mixer this is all the master outputs in that gold box there. So on the top, those are your main outputs. That's the mix part. So that's the entire mix coming out of there. So it's a stereo mix. So I take that out, and on my setup, what I do is I take those are 1/4-inch plugs, and I'm taking that 1/4-inch output into my TriCaster. And the reason I do that is I actually stream direct from my TriCaster. It has built-in streaming. So then that gets the full mix audio, and that goes out to what you're seeing on YouTube and all the HD streams. Okay. This part down here are the 2 auxiliary sends. So on my particular mixer, and it's different on all mixers, on more advanced mixers, they actually have much more of these. They actually have, you can have 4, 6 different auxiliary sends that you can do complete separate submixes for. But this is a fairly basic mixer that I'm using. So this is just 2 auxiliary sends. One on the left is the monitor send, and the other one is the FX send that we talked about before. So I use the FX send because I can completely isolate that, and I just send Mark back the program mix minus himself through that. So I have a 1/4-inch plug in there, and I go from my mixer to my sound card. All right, it has a 1/4-inch input. It's a separate sound. It's a Focusrite box, and then from the Focusrite box, that's what turns into digital to send out on the stream. And that's if I'm going to blab. Okay. On the left-hand side, the monitor send, that's what I use internally to listen to what's going on the program. And I use that because I don't want to hear myself, but I hear everything else. So I hear Mark that way, and I hear if I'm playing any videos that way as well. So there you have it. I'm going to go through a couple other things here on the bottom. So that's your output, and then what about your controls on the bottom? So let's go back to our mixer, and you'll see this section on the bottom, and I'm going to go through what all these mean. This first section here is that audio meter I was talking about before, and it's a very, very basic meter. So all it has is basically 5 lights. So when you set up your mixer, what you're going to want to do is you want to make your peaks should be maybe lighting up that yellow light, but that clip light, the red light, you should never light the red light. And that's very, very important because, and why they call it clipping is in digital audio, it'll sound like a clip. It'll sound like it's cutting out, and that means overmodulated. So you're going to have that kind of clicking sound or clipping sound. So when you set up your audio, and this particular mixer, again, they're all different, but this particular mixer, I use it as a guide to make sure that I'm not peaking too high. But you want to get the peaks right into that yellow area there on the lights. This phantom power button, unless you have a condenser microphone that's a powered mic, you don't have to worry about it. A lot of mixers have built-in power that'll power a condenser microphone. Many times you'll hear myself, Steven, and a lot of the pros recommend dynamic microphones for people for a variety of reasons. But so if you're using a dynamic microphone like I am here, I'm using the ILPR40, you do not need to worry about that button at all. These are your 2 auxiliary sends. So we talked about the monitor send and the FX send. The FX send is what I use to send audio back to Mark minus himself. And this is just a master fader knob. Just like we have the slider knobs on the rest of the mixer. That's just the master for that particular send. The monitor send, the same thing. It's the master monitor send of everything I'm sending to that particular submix. And that's the mix I use to listen to everything here minus myself. So you can see I got basically two mix minuses too. So there you have it. That kind of gives you an idea of what I went through yesterday. as far as my audio. I try. This stuff can kind of get a little bit complicated, and again, the lesson here, and why I say troubleshooting properly is, that's kind of how we did it yesterday, right? So it's so important, especially if you want to do this on a very, very high level. A lot of people want that one sheet instructions and this comes like if you get a new TV, right? You get that, read this first, one sheet instructions, how to set everything up. And, you want to, that's all well and good, but then you want to really get in there and really look at how this stuff works. Because the way I found out what the problem was is we attacked it systematically. And we actually spent a couple of hours on it. So Barb saying, just give me an example of what clipping is. I'll get to the comments in a second. I'm sorry. I just want to get through a couple of things here, but we'll get to the comments in a second. So, I mean, really what I really want to emphasize here is, again, if you really want to do things at a high level, and if you run into problems, it's going to take, you got to have a systematic approach as far as how you determine what the problem is, right? And the key with troubleshooting is isolating what it is not. And usually you start with the easiest first and you work your way down. So what we did was we did a lot of rebooting, restarting. We did a lot of unplugging and plugging of cables, because if it's something really simple like that, that could be your issue, right? So for example, if you're having trouble with your microphone and it's not coming through or whatever, one of the first, especially if you're using a USB microphone, one of the first things you're going to want to do is unplug and replug the mic. And many times what will happen is, since a lot of these mics, especially the ATR 2100 that a lot of folks use on Blab, it has a built-in sound card, and it's already doing the processing within the mic itself. And sometimes, being digital audio, it loses connection or something happens where just unplug and replug solves the issue. So you really want to start with the simplest first and work your way down. So for my issue, we worked all the way down where we isolated and ended up being, we went through everything, ended up being that we isolated it to the HDMI embedded audio going into my TriCaster. And normally that's how I would do it, and I would rely on that. And the TriCaster has a built-in audio mixer, but it uses digital audio. And again, you guys were here yesterday, you heard that the audio Mark sounded like a chipmunk. It sounded very high. And we believe that's a software issue. We really couldn't identify what was causing it. And the weird thing was, I switched the different inputs. I have 4 inputs on my TriCaster, and I tried each one, and it was the same result. So it's very highly unlikely that it was a hardware issue, because if it was, that means all those cards went bad at the same time. That's highly unlikely. So what we ended up doing was, I have the ability to do it manually with analog audio, and that's really how you should be doing it. And so my mixer has ability to send out a mix minus, and it's all I really needed. And frankly, full confession, I was really taking the easy way out, because I didn't want to have to deal with it. So I was kind of breaking my own rule, right? So, I mean, that's not something that you want to do. You want to take the time to learn how to do it the right way. And now I have no problem. Even though I don't have Mark on Skype, what I was able to do with Steven, due to his generous, offering to offer his time, is I was able to test it with him and to make sure that we had good back and forth with the audio and there was no problem. Since I took the audio out of the digital mix and it's all manual, then it doesn't get screwed up, and I have full control over it. And then my mixer off to the side here, what's great about that is I have hardware controls where I can bring down the faders if I need to adjust something, or if I need to bring my audio down. Maybe we have a show where Mark's doing a rather lengthy segment. There's no need for me to have my mic up. I can just bring it down on my audio board, the hardware control, and there it is. I have a physical confirmation that the audio is down. So there's a lot to be said for that type of control versus the digital control. And I know a lot of people here use software, and I'm just going to read a comment here. Leland said, one of the best reasons I've gone to virtual software mixer is so much easier to deal with mix minus through. And that's and Leland in the comments is talking about a software solution, and that's all well and good. You do have to be very, very careful, about that, and make sure you know what you're doing. And Leland brings up a very good point about being a one-man band, and that's very, very true. It does help, but you do have to keep an eye on it and make sure everything's working. And I think maybe what happened with me, it could be anything that could happen, especially with a software solution. You could do a OS update, right? And what was working before, something could break on it where something on the software doesn't work anymore. And so I always say, if you have the ability to create a hardware solution for it, I would tend to go that route. But again, Leland brings up a really good point as far as the software solutions are usually much less expensive because you can run them on the computer you already have. It's just that you want to make sure, and I think Leland, and I agree, Leland. I think Leland is one that can do it because he takes the time to learn how to do it right. So, and also he's monitoring the situation, make sure everything's checked out. He takes the time to rehearse and all that stuff. You do want to be careful about software updates. It can break, and I think my suspicion, to be honest with you guys, is I think that there's something not quite right. Maybe an update, maybe a Mac. I use Macs, so maybe one of the latest software updates could have broken something, because the TriCaster is Windows based. Again, I don't know. So we were, when we were going through my issue, I was really perplexed. So that's why I decided to go the analog way. It just made a lot more sense. It takes that all out of the mix, and now I know exactly where my audio is going. So I would suggest that, especially as you grow as broadcasters, I think that is something that is the way to go if you can do it. Now, it takes some learning, takes some skill and practice to do it, but once you do, you'll talk to a lot of the pros. I mean, Stephen Haywood sets up his whole studio through the mixer. All his audio is going separate through a mixer. He's doing the mix minus correctly. He does multiple aux sends because he has multiple guest Skype machines, and everyone's getting, when I'm on his show, I'm not getting my own audio back. I'm just getting the program mix minus my audio. And the same thing when Mike Myers is on the show, he's getting the program mix minus his audio. He's hearing me, but I'm not hearing myself. So you can see how it can get a little bit complex. But the benefit of that, learning that, is a much more smoother show. You take a lot of things out of the mix as far as what can go wrong. So, anyways, that's kind of like what I wanted to go through today. And some of the comments, there's upwards. There's good and bad. There's advantage and disadvantage with the software solution. I would say, again, the advantage of using a software solution, it's much less expensive, and it's easier to get going. So you can certainly experiment, and there's a lot to be said for software solutions. The downside, of course, is it's software. So it's based on code. So you could have something that breaks, especially if you do an OS update. So you want to be careful with that. If it's something mission critical, I would be very careful about OS updates, doing it right away. Just make sure that everything's going to work properly. Have a backup plan, that type of thing. Thank you, Leland. And that's the key with this mix minus stuff. I mean, when I was putting the show together today, and the reason why I'm doing this show is I really felt I owed you guys something, because you came back. I had all these audio issues. I wasn't going to do a show if it wasn't going to be right, so it would be unfair to you. But I wanted to do something today to kind of explain. It was a good learning experience for me, kind of explain what I went through, and also talk about you hear mix minus and try to present in a simplified way. It is a little complex, and what I would say, guys, is I think the key with all this is if you want to produce video, we happen to be on one of the platforms we're on, it's Blab, and it's very, very simple to get started. And that's a big key to all this is you don't have to deal with the complexity, and you can actually get started. And many people plan and plan and plan and never get started. So that's a big key. And you can always build as you go along, right? But the other thing is, you want to be prepared for when things go wrong. And you also want to evolve too. So I would say if you really want to get serious, you want to build toward maybe getting a mixer and learning how to do mix minus properly and learning audio routing and that type of thing. Doesn't have to be right away, but again, I think that's the important thing. It's a building process. So I hope this kind of helps in some way, kind of taking you through what I experienced yesterday, kind of a simplified explanation of how I implemented a solution and the whole mix minus thing, what that actually means. So I hope everyone understands that in a way. And Knight Rider says, broadcasting is not easy. It's a constant learning curve, starting with getting to know your gear. And that's absolutely right. Walter makes a really good point. And Steven says this all the time, know your gear. I hear that over and over, know your gear. And that's so important. Again, as I mentioned before, you get a new TV, everybody wants to read the one sheet instructions, but eventually you want to read the book, and nobody wants to read the manual. But I'm telling you, it helps tremendously. So if you know your gear, and say you run into an issue, it may be a very minor issue. If you don't know your gear, you don't know that it's minor, or you don't know how to fix it. And if you really know what you're doing and know how your gear operates, then you're able to diagnose issues that much quicker and then come up with a solution. So again, I hope this helps. And Steven says, whatever mixer you get, even if you take advice from someone, please take time to learn it, read the manual, and understand how it works. If not, you're not doing anything to help yourself. And I think Steven really sums it up very, very well there. Know your gear. And this is coming from someone who does a top-notch professional job, and also coming from someone that's learned from experience. I mean, Steven's been doing this for almost 10 years. And he's been very, very candid and very open about when he started out. He started out with a webcam, like everybody does, cobble stuff together, and he used what he had, and he learned how things worked. And I've also brought this up in my previous life. I was a wedding photographer, right? So the reason why I did well at it is first of all, I learned with a professional photographer, local professional photographer that was a top-notch wedding photographer. So I kind of mentored with him, but I learned how photography worked, right? So photography is how light interacts with film, and I started in the film days, but I learned how it worked. And it's no different with digital. It's still how light reacts to a sensor, right? So I got to the point where I was able to look at a scene and knew, okay, this is the aperture and this is the shutter speed. But that came with practice, that came with time, knowing how things worked. Same thing on video production. If you know how your equipment works and know the signal path and can understand exactly, what is mix minus, what is the signal path, how things all fit together, then you're going to be able to take things apart, put them back together, and design the system that works best for you. So that's the key in all this. And Steven says, as Marty and I saw yesterday, we were able to take things out of the mix and figure out where the issue was coming from, because both Marty and I knew how the gear worked, and Marty knew how his stuff was wired, so we weren't wasting time troubleshooting. That's absolutely correct. And Steven brings up a really good point there, is the key with troubleshooting is taking things out of the mix, eliminating possible causes. So you start with a laundry list of this. It could be 20 different things, right? The idea is to cross things off the list and narrow down your issue, narrow down your choices. And so that's what we did. So literally we went through, okay, what's the possible cause of this whole high-pitched audio that I was getting back from Mark? So we had a list of all these things that could be. We started crossing things off the list, kind of checking things, and we ended up isolating it to the TriCaster and the way it was accepting the audio from the HDMI. So, and we got that far and we couldn't figure out, okay, how do we tried all the inputs, how do we remedy this? So we went to the next best thing, which is probably the better solution, is taking all the audio and making it analog and using my mixer and doing a proper mix minus. 2 mix minuses actually. I use a mix minus to monitor, and then I use a separate mix minus to send my audio back to Mark. And there you go. That settles the whole thing, and that solves the whole issue. But like Steven says, knowing your equipment enabled us to go through it in a logical fashion, eliminating eliminating possible causes until we got to what it really was happening, and then being able to implement a solution after that, which is very, very important. But again, if you're just willy-nilly looking at things and not really having a set plan as far as how you troubleshoot, then you're going to be there all day and it's going to get very, very frustrating. So knowing your gear is very, very important. Read the manual. Barb is absolutely right. Read the manual. You can get started, but you got to do it, and especially if you want to, and it's well worth it. If you're really serious, it's well worth it. Tommy asks, Marty, with your normal show with Mark, how many channels are you using on your mixer? Good question, Tommy. I am using one channel for my mic, and that's really about it on my mixer. I use another channel to bring in the audio from Mark. So I bring Mark's audio in from my MacBook Pro, bring it into the mixer, and then goes out into the TriCaster. And I use a third channel to monitor if I'm playing video from my TriCaster, just to monitor that, and I put it in. So I use basically 3 channels. But I think I really only need one required, my mic, so it's a pretty simple setup because I do use a TriCaster to play video. Mix minus is primarily used to connect, Leland saying this, to connect voice over internet protocol into standard sound feed. Yeah, and again, the mix minus, that's so important. So, again, I bring Mark in via Skype. I can bring him in via Google Hangouts or any kind of video chat service or whatever. I happen to use Skype. Skype works pretty well for me. But in order to be able to do the show properly, I need to be able to send him a Mark program audio back. But if I sent the whole mix, he would hear himself. So that's where the minus comes in. So basically, I create a submix of all the program audio. That includes my mic. That includes the audio from the TriCaster to him, minus his own audio. And then I'm doing the same thing on this end, where I'm creating a mix of all the audio in the show minus my own audio, so I don't hear myself. So if I play it on a speaker, I'm not getting confused hearing myself back on a slight delay, and that would be crazy. So anyways, looking to broadcast choir audio feed, which wouldn't yeah, that's correct, Leland. Alfredo would not need mix minus. The only time you need mix minus is if you're doing some type of monitoring or sending audio back to somebody. And a good example again is how I bring Mark in, or how Steven does his show. Steven uses multiple mix minuses with his guests to bring in people remotely. So if you're sending audio back to a remote location, you're going to need to set up some type of mix minus, because that remote location cannot hear themselves back, or else they're going to get very confused, and it's going to be very disconcerting to them, and it's not going to work very, very well. Or you'll get echo if you're not doing it right as well. So that's why that's important. Question from Anissa: would you consider doing a show on basic audio routing and setup to avoid feedback and looping? Absolutely, Anissa. That's a great question. I know that Steven has done shows like that on Broadcast Now. I think they've done mix minus shows and basic audio shows as well. But that's a great suggestion. I know this is a kind of a complicated topic, and it was funny when I was planning for the show today. I was thinking, okay, how am I going to do this simply and kind of illustrate the problem that I had and the solution I had, and talk about this mix minus thing without confusing everybody, because it does get kind of complicated. And I think that's the key with this stuff, is you take it one step at a time. So you kind of break it down, and that's what I tried to do with the slides, and hopefully it was a little clear today. But it's a process, right? So you got to break it down and understand where each connection's going and how it all interrelates. So that's the important thing. But yeah, we can definitely do a show on that as well. Because again, audio, when you're doing video, audio is really more important than the video, to be honest with you. So if you have bad audio, like we did yesterday, I didn't even do a show because it would be pointless. It would be not fair to you guys. It wouldn't be fair to the show. It just wouldn't work. If your video is a little hazy, a little bit, if you're having a little issue, that's a little more forgivable, because at least you can see the person. The audio is really not forgivable, because that's where really all your, and so audio's got to be, if you're going to key anything, get your audio right, even before your video. That is so, so important. If they can't hear you, then it doesn't matter if they can see you, so it doesn't really make any difference there. I'm just looking at some of the comments here. So you don't feedback. Yes. So I know that you guys are doing great in the comments. You're talking about the mix minus. But yeah, so that's a great suggestion. I think we'll do something like that in the future. I hope this was helpful for everybody today. I'm going to wrap this up a little bit here, and I'd be willing to come into the blab separately here. If you want to hold on, I'm happy to take questions offline. But I do want to mention a couple things again with our Facebook group. So we do have a Facebook group. Many of you are already in it. Facebook.com/groups/BTS Live. We'd love to have you there if you're not already part of the group. Many of the people here, like Leland and Alfredo, I think is in there. I'm not sure if Anissa's in there. I know Stephen Haywood's part of the group. Of course, Barb Tomlin, which I want to call out Barb. Barb, again, very early on when Mark and I were doing the show, she took the initiative to come to us and set up the Facebook group, and she's one of the administrators, and she's very, very active and just an all-around great person, very, very generous. And so, Barb, a big thank you to you for all the work you do for the community. You're a big part of this, and thank you again for setting up the group. Our website is btslive.com. Right now, it's a landing page. We stream shows 24/7. So when we're not doing live shows, we are on there, and you can watch previous shows, and get information on the next live show. I always have that going. Eventually, it'll be a full site with show notes and posts. I just got to get it done. And then I do want to promote Steven, the techbuzz.net. Today at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, be another edition of Broadcast Now. Great show. I'm honored to be a guest today on the show. We're going to be talking about building community, and also a little bit about what my experience was yesterday for that audience as well. But you want to join us if you have time for Broadcast Now at thetechbuzz.net. I know Steven also, I think he also broadcasts on Blab as well. And so you want to watch that. And again, I can't thank Steven enough. I know he does. He's very modest, but he is a tremendously generous person. Not only does he know his stuff, and he's a total pro when it comes to broadcasting, but he's a great person. And he spent a couple hours with me yesterday. He's a great friend and a great community member. And I just want to, he won't say this about himself, but I just want to call Steven out. I'll never stop. I mean, this guy is he's my inspiration for doing this, and he's fantastic. So tune in tonight and the pre-show starts. If you want to come in early, the pre-show starts at 5:30, and it's always a lot of fun. So he starts early, gets everything set up, and we kind of yap a little bit pre-show, and that's always fun. Many people here on this show, like Walter and Leland and Barb, are regulars for Steven's show. So highly recommend you guys check out Stephen Haywood today at 6 p.m. for Broadcast Now. A lot more about what I experienced and community as well. Guys, thank you very much. Hopefully this was informative. We are going to get back next week with Mark. Originally yesterday, he was supposed to continue his story of how he is putting together this show with a co-host and kind of the trials and tribulations of creating a show from scratch on YouTube. He does a sports show with Macy Golder, his co-host, and he told the background story of how he came up with the idea, how he found Macy, and he's going to get into some of the issues he's run into and the ups and downs and how to put a show together and that kind of thing. So we're going to kind of focus on Mark next week and now that we got the mix minus stuff figured out, we'll have Mark again next week, Monday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time for another live edition of BTS Live. Thanks everyone for coming for this kind of special impromptu makeup show. And I appreciate the people in this room. I see a lot of familiar faces, and you guys are fantastic. I love doing this. And so we'll see you again next Monday. Again, reminder, Join us later today, 6 p.m. Eastern Time, the techbuzz.net, Stephen Hayward's broadcast from now. It's going to be a great show, and we will see you then. Thanks, everyone, for coming, and we'll see you again next week on BTS Live for another edition, 2 p.m. Eastern on Mondays. Thanks, everyone.